Hello and welcome to the big picture. The debate in this country over the quality of research in the area of science and technology has been going on periodically. The debate has once again started with the bestowing of the highest civilian award, Bharat Ratna, to eminent scientist Professor C.N.R. Rao. Professor Rao, while taking out his ire on the politicians, has complained about the paucity of funds for scientific research, saying this kind of money is nothing. Meanwhile, in the last 10 years, the expenditure on research and development has been growing quite significantly in this country. The Science Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, of which Professor C.N.R. Rao is the chairman, has been advising on how to make India a global scientific power. The National Science and Engineering Research Board, a scientific funding agency, has also been set up. Today, we will look at whether there is paucity of funds for scientific research in this country and what ails the field of scientific research and what needs to be done. To discuss this, I have with me an eminent panel of experts. I have with me Professor Syed Hasnain, member of the Science Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, Professor R. Rajaraman, Emeritus Professor of Theoretical Physics, School of Physical Sciences at the JNU, Prabir Purkayastha of the Delhi Science Forum, and Pallav Bagla, a senior science journalist. Welcome to all of you. Professor Hasnain, I would like to come to you first. You have been part of the PM's Advisory Council, and these complaints we keep hearing periodically that there is not enough funds. Do you think that the problem is the paucity of funds, despite what we have seen, the kind of growth of or the increase in funding in the last 10 years?
Thank you so much for inviting me to this show. I would like to begin by congratulating the Professor C.N.R. Rao, who has been bestowed with this highest honor. By doing so, the Government of India has not only recognized basic science excellence, but also conveyed to the government, conveyed to everyone that we care for the science in the country. Let me now come back to the issue. Yes, I fully endorse what Professor C.N.R. Rao has said. There are several reasons why science is not doing the way it should have done. One of the foremost reasons is, I agree with him, that we are not able to get enough funding. Today we have to realize that science and technology is completely technology driven. Any innovation, any research is so dependent on technology that unless we really cope with the infusions of technology, we just cannot expect to compete with the world. We are unable to bring in new technology simply because we don't have the resources. And in areas which are so critical and the rate at which we are advancing, unless we compete with these technologies available to us, there's no way we can have, say, global presence anywhere. There's no way. India spends less than 1% of its GDP. You are right in saying that funding has gone up. But, for the last several years, ever since I have been in the panel, to the advisory panel to the Prime Minister, we have been always wanting to extend this to about 2%, but we have not even been able to cross 1% of the budget. The second problem that I feel is that whatever little money we are getting, it is not going to the right places. Let me illustrate what I mean by that. Today we are having more of innovation. We are expecting it from the scientific R&D institutions, forgetting the fact that 95% of our science should be carried out in the universities, which attracts the brightest of the brightest minds. And what is the percentage of the share of the scientific R&D that the universities get? Less than 1%. And the issue is further compounded by the fact that of this 1%, 95% goes to central universities, which caters to only 10% of the student population that come to a higher education. Now look at the disparity. We are really not giving the right proportion of money where the money should go.
Who is
and
responsible?
The net result is that we are today...
Professor Hasnain, sorry to intervene. Who is responsible for it, Professor Hasnain? Who is responsible for the funds not going to the right place?
Yes, I can pinpoint the responsibility. I think that this is lack of taking a proper view on what should be the funding structure. I must compliment the present government that now they have started the RUSA, Rashtriya Uchchatar Shiksha Abhiyan. Under this, there is a huge focus on state universities for not only for SNT but also also other areas. So I think that the problem lies more of a systemic problem. I wouldn't be able to say that X or Y or the Z department is important. It is a more of a thinking problem. We think by simply funding the central universities to the hilt, we can achieve little realizing that they only cater to less than 5% of the total student population that goes to our Indian higher education system. Then what is the net outcome? Net outcome is that we are able to produce still some of the finest manpower to deal R&D globally, and they don't stay here.
Okay.
We are producing something like 28% of the total doctors globally are from India, 16% of scientists globally are Indian, and 32% of engineers globally are trained in India. We have about close to 20 presidents of top universities in the US are of Indian origin. So I think net result is that India is losing. We don't get enough funding and whatever money we have for teaching.
Okay, Professor Rajaraman, this is always said the GDP, it's not even 1% of the GDP. I was going through a report which has been, which is the PM's advisory, the Science Advisory Council of Mr. Professor Hasnain also is a member. Just a comparison of 5 countries, except US, which has 10.9% of its GDP towards scientific research and scientific and technological research. UK has 1.79%, China has 1.42%, South Korea has 0.61% and India has 0.60%. There's not much difference in that. Is it the funding only which is the problem?
Well, let me also begin by congratulating Professor Rao. Here I have probably a different point of view from people who are involved in major science funding in India. I can only tell you the story from the ground level as a working scientist. There are different kinds of science which require different types of money. At the middle level, I think there's lots of money. I've never known any middle level scientist applying for funds and not getting it. At the very highest level, where if you want the most expensive equipment or things similar to that, it is expensive. And if you want to compete with scientists who do that kind of science, it is true, there is no end to that, there is no upper limit to it, and there is a problem. Even there, things like the CERN laboratory where I go very often, their experiments are done by hundreds of people and we participate a piece of it.
Where is this laboratory?
This is in Geneva. This is where the so-called God particle was found.
Right.
So there, in that kind of situation, we can again participate because we only pay part of the thing. But as an individual desktop laboratory type scientist, you won't have that kind of equipment, then you do feel the want. Question is, how important is that in the national context?
Right.
And one other point which I wish we come back sometime during this thing is that the scientists also owe something in return for the funds that they are asking. This is very, very rarely mentioned by anybody. And whenever you tell me to, I can elaborate very quickly on what.
Yes, please elaborate
quickly.
Well,
2 things. One is, how well are they regulating the funds that are given to them? Is there any kind...
You mean how well the scientists themselves are regulating?
That's right. For instance, a certain amount of grants are given on the basis of certain expectations. There is no review afterwards that I know of where you try to see how much of those expectations have been met. Now, science is science. You can't predict what will happen. But broadly speaking, you can see. Or if certain predictions were made about certain kind of science going to bring in huge dividends industrially, turned out not to be true, then the people make the predictions clearly are answerable in some fashion.
Absolutely.
So that is one particular way. Second thing is that this problem gets worse at the upper level where very few people have the expertise to judge whether a certain project should be funded. So there are half a dozen people in that particular area, they end up giving up funds to each other, and scientists are human beings. So there's a certain amount of cronyism that does develop. And I don't know of any active procedure for making sure this doesn't happen. And the last thing is that in the US, when you talked about such a high input, much of that comes from industry.
Exactly.
So in India, Indian scientists have not made sufficient effort to tailor their needs to the needs of industries.
But in the I've been looking at some of the figures which I have here. Private sector funding has actually increased pretty tremendous, almost 3 times. It was 6,000 crores in 2004-05. Now in 2011-12, the figure is 21,000 crores. So there has been quite a more than 300% increase of by the private sector.
But we started at a very low level.
Started at a low level.
That's right.
Prabir, this we have seen this increase in funding. Like if I give the total overall picture, including the central sector, state sector, private sector, higher education sector, these are the government figures, national expenditure on research and development in science and technology. It used to be 24,000 crores in 2004-05, 72,620 crores in 2011-12. My question is, do we have the capability to absorb these kind of funds and come out with things? Or do you think these funds which we are seeing, figures can sometimes be very, can also lie, but are these funds going more towards establishment costs, or are they actually being, at least majority of it is actually being used for research?
I think Dr. Rao's statement is both correct and incorrect. Correct insofar as the broad contours of science funding, I think compared to what the country needs, we have subcritically funded science. What also is true, that the institutional capability of absorbing large amounts of money is not there, because we have not built those institutions.
Exactly.
After building IIT, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and so on, we have really built a sector which is insulated from the broad university system, which is what Dr. Hasnain talked about. And that we have funded reasonably well, even though today it's really not on par with what it requires to be.
You mean the university funding?
I'm talking of the IITs and Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, the AIMS. Even they today are not at the cutting edge of science, because the kind of investment they require to make, that's far beyond what we are doing at the moment. That's one part. Other part of it is that if we look at the money that is available, if you are a reasonably good scientist, yes, what Professor Rajaraman said is absolutely correct, that there is, in fact, when we sit on committees to give money, finding good projects is more a problem today. But that is where the new institutions which should have been built have not been built. That requires much larger capital investments we are making. And the bulk of our R&D funding that you talked about has gone to really space and atomic energy, and of course defense. And that may appear to be large amounts of money, but in terms of producing the next generation of scientists, being able to hold scientists, and also making the imagination of the student that they can do something worthwhile, is not there, because the university system, as Professor Hasnain said, is absolutely starved of funds. You cannot do good quality research today unless you leave the universities and select those institutions which are small but are well funded and which are very specialized for that kind of work.
So we need a more broad-based funding.
We need planned investments in science which can create the ability to absorb a larger science funding. Just increasing science funding is not going to be
not going to help.
And this kind of only looking at numbers without looking where it is going,
exactly,
is going to reproduce good quality research. Let's face it, our quality of research is patchy and the bulk of it is mediocre, because we have given really subcritical funding to those kind of research projects. You need to give large funds, focused funds, in order to get results. It does not happen that you sit with money bags and say, come and give me a proposal. A single person science today is not the way science develops.
Absolutely. Pallav, you know, one of the points which has been made in this vision document of the Science Advisory Council I was going through, one is one of the major points, I'm sure all the scientists talk about it among themselves, and there's been debate, liberating science from bureaucracy. Is there where the problem lies? Is it why Professor C.N.R. Rao sounded so frustrated and uttered those words?
Well, let me join my fellow panelists in congratulating both the living legends, C.N.R. Rao and Sachin Tendulkar, for having received the highest honor, Bharat Ratna. It certainly augurs well for Indian science that C.N.R. has been given. But I quite disagree with Professor C.N.R. Rao's statement. Over time, when I have reported science and technology, I have constantly been told there is no shortage of funds. There's really a shortage of people. And there is a shortage of ideas.
And quality people.
And
quality ideas also.
Quality ideas and quality people. There is a paucity of that, and not really that there is a shortage of funds. If you see, in UPA 1, the budgets for science and technology were growing by 25-30%.
Right.
In UPA 2, the budgets for science and technology have remained almost level. They have not even touched the levels of increase by inflation levels. So that is where the problem lies. There is no money in the system. How can science and technology expect to get more money? When there is no money, money can't be given. Every year in the revised estimate, the money comes down. And yes, there is bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is to a certain level stifling the scientists. But then there is bureaucracy everywhere.
Exactly.
There is, when I go to America, I see as much bureaucracy there as I see in India. And some of our scientists should really spend time in the US to understand what kind of
tough bureaucracy they have, and every penny they spend there has to be accounted for.
Which is the problem which Professor Rajaraman was talking about.
That is true. A lot of our scientists get away by spending money and not being answerable. The whole 300 crores is given for nanotechnology. Before that, for so much money came to even CNR Rao himself for superconductivity.
Right.
So much money came to several other institutions. Have they delivered? Not really. Many institutions have been lacking. Is it subcritical?
Can I?
Yes, I'll come to you, Professor Hasnain.
There is the numbers of scientists doing active research in an area is certainly subcritical. So if you're looking for people in solid state structural chemistry, there will be half a dozen people. You need a thriving community. In fact, I was told and I was pointed to data which suggests that a lot of comparison is made with China.
Yes.
And that China has made huge investment. That per capita, per scientist, the amount of money India is investing in science is higher than the per capita, per scientist investment which China has made. So in that connection, you have to compare apples to apples and not oranges.
And so, from what you people are saying, that the funds are really not the critical issue. Yes, Professor Hasnain, some of the points which have been made by the panelists here, I'm sure you'd like to react to that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I would like to react to it. Going back by what Dr. Rajaram has said, I think I fully agree with him that we are not able to be accountable to anybody at all. Even Pallav has made the same statement, and I fully agree. Hello?
Yeah, please continue.
Got disconnected again.
No, I can hear you. Please continue. Okay, we'll come back to him. Yes, Professor Rajaraman, one of the other things which I want to know. When actually Prabir touched upon that thing. Is there too much, even Professor CNR Rao expressed some kind of a frustration about this also, that when we talk of funding for research, is there too much going towards technology rather than pure science? Is there where the problem lies?
I do not think so. It's true that space takes up a lot of money. And
those technology, we're talking of, IT and things like that. Professor Rao seems to have expressed his, disgust and frustration at that.
Well, IT is a phenomenon of its own, and
yes.
people have, but by and large, I would say that is not really. I think probably not enough is going into technology. I mean, from what one can see in terms of the dividends, I don't know the numbers, but in terms of the technological advances that have come about because of improved technological research in India, there isn't that much. In fact, pure scientists have probably done marginally
more
better
work.
Yeah,
I think we got Professor Hasnain. Yes, Professor Hasnain.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on both the comments by Pallav as well as Rajaram. I think they are absolutely correct. There is lack of accountability, self-accountability. And I must give you the example recently of the ICMR and the DHR. They have now started looking at all the projects funded by them so far and asking very pointed question. If I claim that I'll make a vaccine or a diagnostic, I would like to know, where is that claim? Where is that diagnostic? Where is that vaccine? I don't think we have asked such questions in DST or the DBT funded projects. So right now, the reason is very simple. Right now, we are only trying to create an enabling environment. Let everybody have the bare minimum facility.
Professor Hasnain, sorry
you need extra infusion of time and...
No, Professor Hasnain, sorry to intervene. When those questions are asked, and obviously they have to be asked by bureaucrats in these ministries or departments, and then the scientists go up in arms and say that the bureaucrats are interfering in science and they have no idea what it is. And we have to liberate science from bureaucracy. Your own committee's vision document talks about it.
No, can I answer this? I think you don't need the bureaucrats to ask this question. ICMR has done it a wonderful way. They picked up a handful of us and we were asking the questions to our colleagues in the scientific community. So nobody takes offense to that because I know what you are doing and I can ask you this question.
Right.
And believe me, this is going very rightly in the case of ICMR. I think we need to have a self-appraisal, self-accountability introduced by us. Let me also come back to another issue. The subcritical funding, when I mean, you're talking about IITs. I can give you an example of IIT Delhi where I've been here for the last 2.5 years. We really do not have any funding from the institute to do our major scientific activity. I have to get my own grant to be able to do something. Now that is what should not have been the case. They should be funded not only to create good minds, to prepare good minds, but also to promote excellence.
But
that second part is missing.
Sorry, sir, but the panel here
Yeah.
feels that there is actually really no paucity of funds as such.
No, I can tell you in IIT, we have hardly any funds for individual scientists to carry out research. We are asked to teach and we do funds, we raise our own funds.
Girish,
I'm
I think
talking
the
about my own
point
School of
is,
Biological Sciences.
they have
like
to
10 of us,
hustle
and I'm
for
sure
the funds.
The story is the same elsewhere.
Yeah, Prabir.
The point is they have to hustle for the funds, they have to become entrepreneurs to get funds, and it is not institutionally available. So I think the institutional building that we need to really take science forward, that is the missing element at the moment, not just by this issue of not having funds
Absolutely.
or having funds. I think the bigger issue is that to build institutions will need much more funds than individual scientists will try and get.
Prabir's use of the word hustling, I agree, because the process of hustling makes a good scientist into not such a good scientist. There's so much of and the selection process then goes on amongst them as to who becomes more prominent. All that begins to get linked to the hustling problem.
And all the energy goes away in hustling.
Or a fair amount goes away.
A fair amount goes about.
And what gets recognized is the skills of hustling, not the skills of science.
Yes, Pallav.
But see, you require a certain level of competition among scientists
Absolutely.
to reach the funds.
Right.
Sometimes that competition is missing. Now let me point out another problem which Professor Syed Rao did not point out, but we have faced in my reporting in the last 4 or 5 years. There is a certain lack of leadership in science. You have one Syed Rao and there is a big vacuum. You have, in the last 4 years, one has seen 4 ministers of science and technology, and one less lackluster than the other. One more interested in something else, one interested in Anna Hazare, the current one interested only in Telangana. So there is very little interest at the ministerial level in science and technology.
Science and technology is not considered a plum portfolio. That's the whole
It's not
problem.
a creamy portfolio. That's the problem. So these are like waste paper baskets where ministers are put there because they are not required to do anything else, so they are put there. Even the current minister himself says that. Petroleum he pulled out and pulled into science and technology. So there is a lackluster both in scientific leadership and the political leadership. Even at the level of the Prime Minister, there is support for science and technology. But beyond that, it kind of fizzles out.
The support just fizzles out, Professor Rajaraman?
Well, it's like this. I mean, Pallav just now said, he said something else, I want to come back to superconductivity. But what he said about there being a vacuum below a few people who...
Yes.
That I'm afraid I have to squarely blame on the media. There are, in fact, there is a whole spectrum of people above and below the famous names you hear.
I agree.
And that is generally not known to the public, and these people are not in the public realm. They are not even economists, they are scientists. So that there is, in fact, a great richness of extremely competent, not only scientists, but people who worry about the system, about society is there. And they do their work. They are known within the community, but they are not known outside the community.
Right.
So the outside the community...
Let me tell you that yesterday, after this conferring of this Bharat Ratna on Professor Syed Rao, many of the journalists had no idea, including, I mean, if you ask what is it that he has done, I wouldn't know, I mean, in the field of chemistry, because I don't know chemistry. Chemistry is as Greek and Latin to me as anything else. But basic understanding. Basic understanding.
Professor Rajaraman on this point.
Okay.
See, I'm not saying secretaries or departments should be used as yardsticks. But currently, out of the 5 or 6 secretaries, 4 of them are on extension. If there was leadership, why would you need to have people on extension?
You're talking of Science and Technology Department?
Only Science and Technology Department.
I think
you look at DST, you look at DSIR, you look at space, you look at, there's one more department.
Biotechnology.
No, biotechnology has a new secretary who's not on extension.
Okay.
So 5 of the secretaries are on extension.
So what does it mean?
It means there is a certain lack of vacuum in the mid leadership.
This is, I'm sorry, Pallav, because the government wants to roll over secretaries, there is no leadership is a conclusion which is very difficult to make. And maybe that is exactly the problem. The media is using a wrong yardstick to select, to identify who's a good scientist. So I think you have to be...
Good scientists need not become secretaries.
Not only that, the fact that you're not getting new secretaries, extending the life of the old secretaries does not mean that you don't have any good other people. All it means is that you want to continue with the person, whatever be the reason.
Absolutely.
Right.
But my essential point is, and I think Professor Rajaraman has made that point very well, that we respect people who are entrepreneurs in science, to permit me to use that word, who have done well in entrepreneuring both in the media and in the government. No reflection on Professor Syed Rao, but we do not respect people who are recognized as good scientific minds by a peer group, which may be small.
Pallav, I think they are...
Girish, I want to also come across. I have not found, by the way, the bureaucracy to be a problem. In fact, scientific bureaucracy could be a problem because they sort of compete with each other. But the bureaucracy in the science, at least I interact with DST, DIT, the electronics, I find them quite amenable to the scientific and technical community. So I think that is not the problem. The problem really lies elsewhere.
The problem lies with the politicians?
Problem lies
you agree with Professor Syed Rao's outburst?
I think the problem lies with the fact that the political leadership in the country, as well as the scientific leadership, has not done institution building after the first generation of institution building, which was done actually in Nehru Bhabha's time, on Sarabhai's time. After that, we have not done institution building. That is our problem.
Professor Hasnain, one second, I'll come to you, Pallav. Professor Hasnain, you think that is where the problem lies? Is that the reason for Professor Rao's frustration?
I agree, because only lately we have been able to build new IITs, new IISERs, and if you go to these new IISERs, you will find out they are trying to replicate what IIC has done, what other existing IITs have done. So give some more time, things will change. That is my optimism that I have in the system.
Yes, Pallav.
See, that is the whole point. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in his first term gave a huge boost. Number of IITs increased, number of Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research came about. But there are no people in faculty positions.
Now,
50% of the faculty is vacant.
What has happened to this National Science and Engineering Research Board? Very quickly, Professor Rajaraman.
Well, it's doing its work, but again, it's a question of what are the guidelines that it uses. Does it know how to spot people to whom to give the appropriate funding? This is where the problem comes. And there is also the question of what is it that university science, which is being neglected, and as Professor Hasnain said, I agree with him. But one must ask, how did this happen? You asked the question. In fact, the people who, by and large, were responsible for the neglect of the universities, who complain about the qualities of the universities, are precisely the people who grab the money away from the universities into the research institutes. Not any one individual, there is again a collective there.
Yes.
So, and building of new institutions like IISERs and so on is good, but that is further depriving existing universities whatever minimal talent they were able to attract earlier.
Professor Hasnain, last words very quickly to you. Well, this is a very interesting point Professor Rajaraman has pointed out. Is the government and your advisory council at your level aware of these kind of problems?
Yes, we are aware about it, and that's why I'm saying that I have a lot of optimism. I do hope that things will change, and they are changing. But nonetheless, we need to do mid-course corrections all the time. We cannot simply follow a line and hope that the line will end up taking us to deliverables.
Okay, I think on that note, we need to end. The frustration expressed by the Bharat Ratna about the funding and other things as far as the science, science and technology research is concerned, is something it has come back into debate, and hopefully that will result in some kind of improvement. As Professor Hasnain says, he is optimistic. Let's all try to be optimistic and watch how it will improve in the coming years. Thanks to all my guests, Professor Hasnain, Professor Rajaraman, Prabir Purkayastha and Pallav Bagla. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on the big picture, same time tomorrow.